I never knew that Phantomas was a Spanish game as a kid, but somewhere deep in my childlike mind, I always knew there was something Spanishy about it. Spanish platform games on the ZX Spectrum from the mid-80s were always, and I mean always, so punishingly difficult that they gave off an aura. And this seems contradictory because weren't all platform games on the ZX Spectrum stupidly difficult?
Oh yes, sir. Absolutely, sir.
But Spanish ones were just so very Spanishy about it. If you take a game like Manic Miner, for instance, you'll probably also say, well, that's just too difficult. Why does grass kill you? That's stupid. And you'd be right, that is stupid, but we're not here to complain about that. Manic Miner is lauded as one of the Spectrum's best platform games because its difficulty is very much a binary switch. If you get hit, you're dead, even if it was grass that caused it. Levels are mechanically tuned so that each and every enemy can and should be avoided. It is designed in such a way that you can go from the start of the game to the end of the game without losing a single life if you're good enough to do so. That's good game design for the time it was released. It seems elementary now, but goddamn if Matthew Smith wasn't one of the only guys who actually seemed to pick up that basic rule. To compensate for a lack of accuracy, a lot of platform games introduced an energy bar, which, in theory, should make things a little less difficult, but 9 times out of 10, they were merely a plaster over sloppy enemy placement or lazy level design, or both. And this happened time and time and time again. You're not expected to be able to get through the game without being hit, and as such, the placement of enemies is often a big sloppy mess, thrown together haphazardly and stuck in the budget section of W.H. Smith's. Now that wasn't exclusive to Spanish platform games, but what tended to make them stand out were two other things in conjunction with this. An interesting looking game that tried to kill you off before you'd even seen 2% of it, and an atmosphere mysteriously lacking in weird British humour. The Spaniards, for example, weren't as fond of angry toilets as we are. I don't know why, they just aren't. It's not part of their culture. Britain celebrates their toilets like no other country. It's all we've got left. This leads me back around to today's game, a childhood favourite no less, and a game that is absolutely not worth playing now, so I'll just get that out of the way. Phantomas. I didn't know Phantomas was a Spanish game as a kid, even though I definitely did know, because Codemasters tried to dress it up as a jovial British game. Here's what the original cover from Dynamic looks like. That's very Spanishy, right? I think we can all agree that this cover is exceptionally weird. Now here's the Codemasters cover. They've Britain washed the Spanish out, the cheeky bastards. They didn't even bother to change the loading screen to match. It still shows this bizarre alien man, and even better, the game description makes absolutely no sense when you sit it alongside this image. Phantomas comes from a long way off, the galaxy Andromeda in fact. He was programmed only to rob and plunder. As Phantomas, your task is to find hidden treasure in the millionaire's mansion. To do this, you must first travel to the clone planet Earth Gamma and find the mansion, using space transporters, planes and helicopters. I'm sorry, but this image does not convey that story. This image conveys that story. We're off to a good start. I've been talking for an hour and I've not even started on the game yet. So let's have a look at the game, shall we? It's exactly what you were probably expecting it to be. It's a platform game with horrible enemy placement, a single life, an energy bar that may as well be set to constantly deplete considering how many things are going to zap it down to zero. It's a Spanish platform game, and as such, I hate everything about its game design, but that's not why I'm talking about it today. You'll no doubt have noticed that on discussing good game design, I specifically mentioned Manic Miner, not Jet Set Willy. Jet Set Willy takes what Manic Miner did and then expands it into a huge mansion that you need to explore, and as a kid, that's exactly what I did with these games. I explored. I tried my best to see all the sights the game had to offer. I wasn't attempting to complete the thing, God knows that would never happen. I was simply trying to absorb as much of this other world as I possibly could. I wanted to check out that swinging rope. I wanted to see that weird evil head in the chapel. I wanted to visit the very British angry toilet. And I did all of this quite a bit but I didn't do it as much as I did it with Phantomas. As an exploration game, Phantomas was something else entirely. The overall goal here was to hit a bunch of switches for reasons I don't fully understand, but ignoring that entirely meant that there was a weird world of Spanish nonsense to check out. Firstly, this helicopter that leads you to a machine with a switch on it. Why did that happen? I'm simply not Spanish enough to understand. Further along, we come across what you'd most likely assume is a piece of scenery. A rocket. Now, you can just jump over it as you can with everything else, but stand in a specific spot and...
The slowest trip of my life.
An entirely new planet. A planet with a switch on it, and that's it. But an entirely new planet, no less. What an excellently Spanish reason to visit the moon. A single switch. That's over-engineering the Spaniards' way. Phantomas was full of things like this. When it wasn't just standard bricks and mortar, it felt otherworldly, labyrinthine, and for the explorative child, that slapdash health bar simply made exploration a little bit easier. If something was too difficult to bypass, I could just brute force my way past it so I could see what else there is to see. Even if the game, at one point, tries to kill off a good percentage of its players, both in-game and in real life, it seems. This is just unfucking necessary. Phantomas did not review well, as you'd expect, but it was £1.99 in the Codemasters budget range, so of course I owned it. And Codemasters ended up releasing the sequel in the same year, but they also didn't release the sequel because instead of releasing the sequel, they Britain-washed it again. This is the dynamic release cover, weirdly hiding the two because I guess they couldn't work out how to fit it in with the fancy Phantomas font. And here's the Codemasters cover. Vampire, which once again features the weird Spanishy loading screen with our Spanishy thief from Phantomas, even though Codemasters were determined to now pretend he was called Brock the Brave. Typical British laziness. I have reviewed Vampire on the C64, which is basically just the ZX Spectrum game, but on a C64. They didn't even bother to hide it. Again, lazy. I didn't recommend the sequel, and I just as heartily can't recommend the original. They are torture simulators, but once upon a time, they would have been my entire weekends, squirreled away in my room, looking for an 8-bit room I'd not yet discovered. I'm too old for that now, and so are you, and so Phantomas stands as a relic to the past, a time when neither of us were that old, a time when Spaniards made games that fascinated me, and a time when toilets were at the heart of Britain. What a truly nostalgic journey this has been.
How I invented the toilet. 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 I spent 3 years on that toilet.